Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Khadija. I am a pediatrician here at the Saudi German Clinic in the Back Hills in Dubai. I have a postgraduate in neurodevelopment and going through a master's in autism. And so I'm here to talk to you today about neurodivergence and neurodiversity and child behavior. So the aim of this talk is to educate everyone on, I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about autism, about child behavior, and so there are some things that are, autism in general, the topic of autism has changed over the years. And so when I do talk, I am going to talk about children who are autistic. So before I begin, I think that it's important that we talk about how we speak to families with either themselves being autistic or having children who are autistic. So there is, patient first and identity first, addressing families and children. So when it comes to, a lot of families do prefer identity first, which is, saying autistic. But there is, however, some families who do prefer, patient first. So, say a child with autism. So whenever we do discuss topics, relating to autism in general, we always ask families what they prefer and how they prefer to be addressed and how they prefer to be spoken to, because it's really highly individualized. So just for this talk, I will be using identity first, just because in the community, in the autistic community, in families with autism or children who have autism, a lot of the families do prefer identity first. So we're not using any labels to offend anyone. And if I do, that is not the intention. So let's get to it. So let's talk about child behavior in general. So we know that behavior or child behavior, behavior in general serves a function, it serves a purpose, okay? Behavior is biological. Behavior is biological and it's the way that you communicate. It is a form of communication and it serves a function. So when we say that it serves a function, we're saying that it's, when you're hungry, you eat. And that's the behavior that's associated with hunger. If you hear a loud sound, if the music is too loud, you cover your ears. And that's a form of communication to say that that sound is too loud. When you hear really loud sound and you cover your ears, or your child covers their ears, it's a form of communication and it serves a function. The function is saying that that sound is too loud for your body. And so you communicate in that way, in covering your ears, that the sound is too loud. So behavior in general serves a function. Now, remember that when it comes to autism, a lot of the time, remember that skill profiles differ. Learning differs. So the way in which there are learning differences when it comes to neurodiversity, when it comes to our neurodivergence, there are a lot of learning differences, and we have to appreciate those differences. So in general, if behavior serves a function and if behavior has a function in a way to communicate, so if we do have a learning difference, this will affect the way in which that behavior will come across. So behavior functions as a form of, to obtain an object or to obtain a certain outcome. A function to as self-regulation. It's a function for self-advocacy. It's a function for to avoid certain certain stimuli that are uncomfortable. So it's a form of protecting yourself from certain unpleasant stimuli. It's a way to gain attention as well. And so you can see that behavior serves multiple functions. Now, at the end of the day, when we talk about children who are neurodivergent, when it comes to their behaviors and their learning differences, there are certain behaviors that were always told, or in the past, that was always said that, there are certain behaviors we need to change to make them more socially acceptable. And especially when it comes to, our neurodivergence, trying to change behaviors just to be socially acceptable is in itself not acceptable. Okay, so we have to, sorry, I'm having a bit of issues with my, okay. So we have to remember that when we talk about behaviors now, especially in our neurodivergence, when we talk about behavior, we need to, because behavior, again, whether it's a neurotypical child or neurodivergent, behavior serves a function and it's a form of communication. And some behaviors are biological and it's just a reflex. And so with that reflex, they can't control it. Whether neurodivergent, neurotypical children, they can't control that biological need or that behavior. So a lot of the time when it comes to behavior and talking about behavior being socially acceptable, these are terms set by individuals or society that there are certain behaviors that make them uncomfortable and so they need to change. So no, this is the wrong way to think about it, and we need to change that perspective. Now, when we're talking about behavior, there are three main things we have to look at. Is the behavior harmful to the child or to others? Is it distressing to the child? Okay, and is it affecting their learning? So any behavior that a neurodivergent child has, if it does not affect these three factors, more often than not, it does not need to be changed. It does not need to be addressed. So if it is distressing, if it's harmful, and if it's affecting their learning. So these, I'm repeating it again because it's so important to understand that, when it comes to neurodivergence, that we have to look at these three things to decide whether we are going to really address the behavior and try to change the behavior, or whether we are going to continue to allow them to express themselves, which is really what they're doing. So let's talk about a few behaviors that are the most common ones. So when we talk about behaviors like stimming, so stimming behaviors include hand flapping, they include jumping, they include even repeating words and phrases. This is also part of stimming. So listen, some behaviors of stimming can include head banging, okay, which now you can see the difference. There's a difference between hand flapping, there's a difference between head banging. And so if the behavior is harmful to the child or others, or it's distressing for the child, then we need to address that. So hand flapping is a form of sensory input. And so the child is actually just happy doing that, and it's giving them that sensory input. Either the hand flapping itself is providing a sensory input, and so it's a part of self-regulation, or they enjoy the movement of the hand. So remember that that's a sensory input, and they're enjoying that. So we don't need to take away that enjoyment from them. Headbanging, however, we need to address it. So we need to know what they are trying to communicate. Are they trying to get more of a sensory input? Are they looking for that sensory input that they need. So in this way, instead of trying to change the behavior, we give them to change that behavior, we give them an alternative. So remember that when it comes to sensory input, what we actually need to do is not just say that we're going to change the behavior. We need to give them something else to give them that sensory input, because that's how they self-regulate. And so we need to give them this. And another behavior that we can talk about is also meltdowns and tantrums. So every child will have a meltdown and a tantrum. But remember that our neurodivergent children tend to have meltdowns and tantrums over something that may seem trivial, that may seem, and I'm emphasizing on seem, because for neurotypical children, when it comes to sensory input, they don't feel it as much as our neurodivergents do. So our neurodivergents, a sensory input can feel loud for them. It can feel like a lot for them. So you may notice that more often than not, they would have meltdowns and tantrums, and this can be in the form of verbal, it can be physical, it can even be withdrawal. So withdraw themselves from that situation. Now, again, if it's verbal or physical, say biting, say when they're having this meltdown, when they're having this tantrum, that they start biting, that they bite themselves, or they're injuring themselves, or they're biting their caregiver, their parent. So again, are we going to change this behavior? Are we going to reinforce change in this behavior? Are we gonna put a boundary and say, this is not right? Is that the only thing we're gonna do? No, because that doesn't actually fix anything. What you actually need to do, and this is another point of the talk, is what you actually need to do is assess the behavior and see what is the behavior trying to tell you. What is your child, or what is the child trying to communicate to you? Remember that whether they are speaking or non-speaking, the point being that they are trying to communicate something to you. And I think more often than not, with our children or neurodivergents who are not speaking, we tend to try and set boundaries with a child that doesn't really know how to say what they feel or how they feel yet, if at all. And so by trying to change the behavior in that way without figuring out what the trigger is, or what's going on, or what they're trying to tell you, it really doesn't work. It doesn't work to just try to force change on the behavior without actually knowing what they are trying to communicate to you, and without finding the trigger. So we are not reinforcing a healthy way of managing, of self-regulation for the child. So we're not actually benefiting the child or the family. So it is so important to find the trigger, and then to work around it and see what works for the child. It could be distraction. It could be, if there's overcrowding, they're overstimulated. If it's loud noises, put the headphones on. If it's that they are feeling unsafe, take them to a safe space. So there are so many things that your child is trying to communicate with you in that moment, and knowing the triggers is so important. So one piece of advice that I can definitely give to families here is that if you find that your child is having a lot of meltdowns or tantrums, I advise keeping a diary, and with keeping that diary, to log down what the triggers are. And I think that it's so important to, I can understand that, at times, for caregivers, for parents, for families, it is quite frustrating. But remember that we also need to effectively try to control our frustrations. And it's not easy at all. Definitely 100%. It is very hard. And are we able to hear? Uh, Sorry, the audio. Yes. Okay. So, all right. So, yes, I'm not sure until where you heard, but family dynamics and support for families is a big part of overall support that we do provide for neurodivergence. And so that is, I'm going to go off topic, and it's very easy for me to go off topic when, when I talk about, these issues, and, I'm very passionate about it. So where we are is at keeping a diary to note down the triggers. Once you know the triggers, and once you know what your child is trying to communicate to you, this is how we can effectively address, address the issue, or address the challenge that that the child is facing. Um, Another thing is repetitive behaviors. So when we talk about repetitive behaviors, I'm talking about when a child constantly opens and closes a door, or when a child lines up um, toys, or lines up things. Remember that this repetitive behavior is a child gaining control of their environment. So they are trying to gain a sense of control over their environment. So it is also partly biologic, and so it is serving a function on its own. Now, again, allowing children to express themselves in this way is completely fine. There's nothing that you have to do about. Okay, so when it comes to opening and closing a door, of course, you do have the fear that they might injure themselves. Doors are quite dangerous when you open and close them, and they get their fingers stuck in there. So this is quite, it's hazardous when it comes to opening and closing doors. So we have to be careful with that. However, we can distract them, give them toys. If they want to line up their toys, this is them gaining control of their environment. This is the way that they want to express themselves. And so we don't have to change those behaviors. Again, when we look at the three things, is it harming themselves or others? Is it distressing to the child? Is it affecting their learning? Okay, now, to some degree, repetitive behavior can affect learning. Now, remember that children in general learn by seeing, they learn by imitation. And so if they keep with their repetitive behavior and it's really intense, and it's not allowing them to pick up on different experiences and to learn from different experiences, then yes, it is affecting their learning. And so we need to work on attention at that point. So joint attention. So we're not trying to change the behavior, we're trying to add something to it in that we can better their learning and help them through it. Another behavior that not so long ago, that was subject to that we have to change is echolalia. So echolalia is basically repeating of words that they've heard, and so they can be immediate or delayed. So when it comes to echolalia, remember that we don't need to change this behavior. Remember that echolalia, it's something that our neurodivergents use to build on their language and to build on their self-generated language. So we have to really remember that this is not something we need to change. They use the words that they hear. They use the words that they hear and they repeat it over and over again. And then they manipulate it in a way that it generates a language or a form of language for them. And it is actually the most amazing thing. I think that in the past it was subject to change, or that they wanted to change because it wasn't quite fully understood. And when you really understand the depth of it, and when you truly understand the meaning of it, it's truly amazing. And so when we have echolalia, they will repeat the words, but it will, if you notice, it will change. It's not, we can't stereotype it and just see what you see or what you think about echolalia. And so, I mean, it's the most amazing thing that you will see that those words will actually change over time, and they will plus and minus here and there, and then adjust it to use it in their own way as a form of communication. And so we encourage it, to help them as well to develop self-generated communication or language. And, and they have different language processing. And so, some children are analytic language processors and some are Gestalt language processors. And so we find that our neurodivergence or autistic children use Gestalt language processing. And so what that means is that rather than using single phrases such as car, and so whenever you have analytic learning, it's, you go from car to, learning red car to learning that's a red car. So that's analytic. But Gestalt is that they use whole phrases, whole units to describe, to start with. And so that's where, so whenever, if a mother says, wow, that's a fast car, that's a fast red car. And so the child will repeat that for every car that they see, regardless of the color. It's going to be, wow, that's a red car, that's a red car. And so this is their form of expression, and this is how they've picked up on language. And so we can build on that. So instead of trying to change the behavior, we build on that. We actually build on that, and we start to see that they do develop self-generated communication. And it's actually, it's actually really, such a beautiful thing. Yes. Oh, yes. So another thing is scripting. So scripting is actually delayed echolalia. So they will, they will take phrases or words or what they've seen in a cartoon or movie, and then that's what they will use to incorporate into, into daily life. And again, we work with that to allow them to be able to develop self-generated communication. I think a beautiful way in which it's put in a book, there's a book called Neurotribes. A really beautiful book. I think all families, everyone should read the book Neurotribes, and it really gives you an essence of things, and it's really so great. So I think that a lot of what I've mentioned already has to do with proper communication and forms of communication. So you can see how important communication is. And listen, all life forms on Earth have a form of communication. That's how important it is. So communication is a way of understanding each other. And now when it comes to our neurodivergence, we find that they have difficulty in communication, in social communication, so in communication in general. So you have speaking and children who are not speaking. And so we need to help them through this, and we need to help them communicate, because remember that, like I said, and I repeat it, that behaviors have a function, and they are a form of communication for everyone. It is a form of communication. And if a child cannot effectively communicate and cannot effectively tell you what their needs are, they get frustrated. And so now we have we have AACs, which are augmented and alternative communications. So what that entails is, so they have no tech, they have low tech, and they have high tech AACs, or augmentative and alternative communications. So, I mean, no tech or low tech would include sign language and gestures. It includes picture exchange communication systems. So, where you use pictures to actually, that would be our speech and language pathologists. So our SLPs, they will be the ones to actually use the PECs, which is using the pictures. And this is a form of communication where you would use these pictures as a form of communication. It's sort of a visual system, so that that your child can show it to you, and that's the form of communication. And so it's very effective and long lasting. Another form of communication is actually the functional communication training. So functional communication training is, again, using visual aids. So seeing, you have an assessment first. So you will find the challenging behaviors, or behaviors that are, again, affecting learning, causing harm, causing distress. So you would assess and deeply assess these behaviors and see how you can use the tools that you have, whether it be pictures, signs, gestures, how what is the best way to help this child communicate their needs, communicate their frustration, to advocate for themselves, to comment on certain things. So you start off from the basics, which is communicating needs, and then it slowly builds up to the child being able to comment on aspects, to advocate for themselves. So I think that this is so important, because they do, as these children get older. I mean, we're not only talking about the younger age groups, we're talking about older children, we're talking about young adults, we're talking about older adults. So we need to help them to effectively communicate, and these are great ways to help them effectively communicate. So I have children who come in and they had no way of explaining their pain. They had no way of explaining what's going on with them. And so, we offered AACs, and, some children work with devices. So you have AEC devices, which are basically just apps that are on their devices that's going to help them communicate. So they put in what they want to communicate across, and this app on the device will communicate that across, either in words or in writing. And so effectively the child is able to communicate their needs, communicate their problems, communicate their pain. And it really helps a lot. And so, it reduces the frustration, for the child, for the families as well, who are trying to understand their child. And so it really helps a lot to be able to communicate. So if there's anything that I leave you with, it's that, look into AACs, look into augmentative and alternative communication, all children are with devices, and so you have a lot of apps that go with those devices as well. I can always share that information at a later date. So, give you details if you're looking for details on that. You will find them with your SLPs and some clinical psychologists who do assessments for AACs. So yes, so I can also share that information with any of you if you're looking for that. So yes, I think in general, I mean, again, like I said, I can talk for days on these topics. So I think that's just the tip of it. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot that needs to be discussed, and families need to be educated about this. And especially our neurodivergent community needs a lot of support, and families need a lot of support. And we need to work as a team. And yes, so I don't know if there are any questions that anyone has. I will just check in. So let me just see here. Yeah. Nope. That is falling. Okay. All right. Let me just see what is happening here. Okay. So, yes. Okay. All right. So I think that if anyone does have questions, you can always speak through Autism Connect. You can put your questions through to them, or you can put the questions through to me. So yes, I really love what they do, and I am so honored to be able to speak on their platform. And I think that we're just really coming together for the children to help them through it. And remember, I think that another thing to remember is that not everything is psychological. Not everything is a behavioral problem. Listen, when it comes to children with with social challenges and social model of problems, medical models do come in there. Not every behavior is associated with their whatever label that they have been given. Remember that it can be medical as well. They do need to have checkups, and any changes in behavior for any child in general, any change in behavior needs to be thoroughly assessed and addressed. So, it's, for example, there was a child. He was 8 years old, and he actually was he started to act that I think that when the teachers had changed, and so he started to go to the nurse every day, and he was just not feeling well. And this is an older child, so he's 8 years old. So every day that in the morning that he would end up being at the nurse, and he wasn't feeling too well. So they took it as that it was a behavioral change based on the stress of his old teacher not being there, and there was something new, which yes, can definitely be a part of it. However, they found that this was happening, this was just recurrent, and it just wasn't improving no matter what they tried. So this child was an autistic child, is an autistic child, and so but they tried to see why the behaviors happen, and then they just left it to what, he's probably stressed, he's upset, and they just went with it in that way. After some time, they started to notice that there was a relation between eating food and having these uncomfortable behaviors or acting out. And so when parents, when the parents were informed and they were told to observe the behavior, they did find that it was related to food, that after food that he would have a certain behavior, or he would turn his head, and so he rolled his eyes as well. And so it was actually found that the child had reflux and was really suffering with reflux, and stress can make reflux worse. So instead of just leaving it to that it's just stress, it ended up being reflux. And when he started receiving treatment for reflux, he actually started to improve with the behaviors as well, and he started to settle down. So child and parents felt better. So I mean, we can't just treat these children, our neurodivergents, as if everything is just, it's just the way the child is. It really doesn't work like that. So we really have to be more supportive and more intuitive. We have to be more observant with behaviors. We definitely have to observe the behaviors well. Like I said, they do serve a purpose, they serve a function, and they are very important to understand what the behavior is trying to tell you. So yes, again, going on for days with this. So if there aren't any questions still, then I will sign off. And yes, and I hope that if you do need any help at all, that I am available at any time on Facebook through Autism Connect or on Instagram. So yes. Mhm. Okay. Mhm.